What if the stronger side had won? Not the side we think of as stronger, the side that actually had more soldiers, more ships, and more ways to win a fight that nobody expected. Imagine a ship that costs $13 billion. It is over 1,000 feet long and stands 20 stories above the water. It carries over 4,000 sailors and more than 70 advanced fighter jets. This is the USS Gerald R. Ford. It is the most advanced piece of military technology ever put to sea. For decades, the world has assumed this ship is untouchable. It is protected by a shield of destroyers, cruisers, and submarines. It has radars that can see for hundreds of miles. It has weapons that can shoot down missiles from the edge of space. In the middle of the open ocean, nothing can get near it. But the world is not just open ocean. There are places where the water gets very narrow. There are places where a $13 billion giant has to walk through a crowded hallway. The most dangerous of these hallways is the Strait of Hormuz. It is the gateway to the Persian Gulf. At its narrowest point, the shipping lanes are only a few miles wide. 20% of the world's oil passes through this tiny gap every single day. If the oil stops moving, the global economy stops working. This is where the giant meets the gnats. Across the water, Iran has spent decades preparing for a very specific kind of war. They know they cannot build a ship like the Ford. They know they cannot win a fair fight against the United States Navy. So, they decided not to fight a fair fight. Instead of one giant ship, they built thousands of tiny ones. These are fast attack craft. Some are barely larger than a speedboat you would see at a lake. They are made of fiberglass and wood. They are hard to see on radar because they are so small and sit so low in the water. Each one costs less than a luxury car. They do not carry complex computers or long-range missiles. They carry heavy machine guns, rocket launchers, and simple mines. Individually, one of these boats is not a threat to a carrier. A single shot from a deck gun would blow it out of the water. But the Iranians do not plan to send one boat. They plan to send 80 or 100 or 200. They call this swarm warfare. The idea is simple. If you throw enough rocks at a giant, eventually one of them is going to hit an eye. The United States Navy has watched this develop for years. They have practiced for it in simulations. They have designed new weapons specifically to stop it. But a simulation is not the same as the real thing. In a simulation, everyone follows the rules. In the real world, things break. Communication fails. People get scared. And the math starts to change. We like to think that better technology always wins. We believe that a smart missile will always beat a dumb rocket. But there is a limit to what technology can do. A single radar system can only track so many targets at once. A single gun can only fire so many bullets per minute. If you have 80 targets coming at you from every direction, the math becomes terrifying. The carrier has to be right 80 times. The swarm only has to be right once. This is the tension that sits under the surface of the Persian Gulf every day. The most powerful ship in history is sailing through a corridor owned by an enemy who specializes in chaos. The world assumes the carrier is safe because it is big. But in the Strait of Hormuz, being big might be the very thing that makes you vulnerable. One afternoon, the routine might stop. One afternoon, the radar screens might fill up with 80 tiny dots, moving at 50 miles per hour. And in that moment, the history of naval warfare will change forever. Imagine a small room. It is not on a ship. It is hidden deep inside a mountain along the coast of Iran. Inside this room, there is a commander. He is not looking at the ocean with his eyes. He is looking at a screen that shows every large ship moving through the Strait of Hormuz. He has been watching the USS Gerald R. Ford for days. He watched it enter the Persian Gulf. He watched it conduct flight operations. Now, he is watching it head back toward the narrowest part of the water. This commander does not have a fleet of destroyers to stop it, but he has a radio. And on the other end of that radio are 80 separate crews. These crews are hidden. Some are tucked into small, jagged coves along the shoreline. Some are sitting in the middle of busy fishing ports, disguised as civilian boats. Others are tied up to oil platforms, bobbing in the waves. They have been waiting for this specific signal for months. They are not professional sailors in the way we think of them. They are members of the Revolutionary Guard. They are trained for one thing only. They are trained to die if it means taking the giant down with them. The commander looks at the clock. The tide is right. The sun is low in the sky, creating a blinding glare across the water. This is the perfect moment. He picks up the radio and says one word. It is a code word. It means the hunt has begun. Suddenly, 80 engines scream to life. These are high-performance engines, the kind you would find on a racing boat. They don't produce a low rumble like a warship. They produce a high-pitched whine that carries for miles. The boats tear out of their hiding spots. They are spread out across 50 miles of coastline. To a casual observer, it looks like chaos, but it is a very carefully planned kind of chaos. They are not all rushing toward the carrier in a straight line. They are circling. They are zigzagging. They are coming from the north, the east, and the south all at once. Now, let's look at the bridge of the USS Gerald R. Ford. It is one of the most professional environments on Earth. Everything is quiet. Everything is controlled. The sailors on watch are looking at the most advanced radar screens in the world. A young operator notices a flicker on his screen, then another, then 10 more. At first, he isn't worried. The Strait of Hormuz is always crowded. There are tankers, fishing boats, and local patrols everywhere. But these new dots are moving too fast. They are moving at 45 knots, and they are all heading for the same coordinate. The operator reports the contact to his supervisor. The supervisor looks at the screen and feels a cold knot in his stomach. This doesn't look like a routine patrol. It looks like a formation. The bridge crew calls out to the approaching boats over the radio. They use the international hailing frequency. They identify themselves as a United States warship in international waters. They tell the boats to stay clear. There is no answer. The dots on the screen are now only 5 miles away. At 50 miles per hour, that distance disappears in minutes. The captain of the Ford is called to the bridge. He has a very difficult decision to make. If he fires too early, he starts a global war. If he fires too late, his ship is gone. He looks at the radar. The 80 dots have now formed a perfect circle around the carrier's strike group. They are closing the distance. The carrier's escort ships, the destroyers, start to move into position. They are trying to put themselves between the tiny boats and the carrier. But there are too many boats. For every destroyer, there are 20 attackers. The Ford is like a buffalo being surrounded by 80 wolves. The wolves are small. The buffalo is massive. But the buffalo can only kick in one direction at a time. The wolves are coming from every direction at once. The alarm on the ship begins to wail. It is a sound every sailor hopes they never hear in real life. General quarters. 4,000 people start running to their battle stations. The heavy steel doors are slammed shut and locked. The pilots in the ready room scramble toward their jets. But they are too late. The boats are already too close for the jets to be useful. This is not a long-range battle, fought with missiles and satellites. This is a knife fight in a dark room. The captain looks at his weapon officers. He gives the order he was hoping he would never have to give. Engage all hostile contacts. The peace is over. The math of the swarm is about to be tested. The math of war does not care about how much money you spent on your ship. It only cares about numbers. The USS Gerald R. Ford has a defensive system called the Phalanx. It is a massive machine gun that fires 4,500 bullets every minute. It is designed to create a wall of lead that nothing can pass through. The carrier also has the rolling airframe missile. These are small, fast missiles designed to intercept anything that gets too close. On paper, the Ford is a fortress. But every fortress has a limit. Imagine you are standing in a field with a garden hose. You can easily wash away 1 or 2 tennis balls thrown at you. But what happens when 80 people throw 80 tennis balls at the same time? You can hit 10, maybe you can hit 20. But 60 of those balls are going to hit you. This is the problem of saturation. The carrier's computers are the best ever made. They can track hundreds of targets at once. But a computer cannot pull a trigger for a gun that is already busy. Each defensive system on the carrier takes a few seconds to lock onto a boat and destroy it. In those few seconds, the other 79 boats are still moving. They are moving at 50 miles per hour. That means every second they are not being shot, they are getting 70 feet closer. If the engagement starts when the boats are 2 miles away, the carrier only has about 140 seconds to stop them. If it takes 5 seconds to destroy one boat, the math becomes a nightmare. One gun can only kill 28 boats before the rest reach the hull. The carrier has multiple guns, but the swarm is not coming from one spot. They are spread out in a circle. This forces the carrier to spread its defenses thin. Some guns will be overwhelmed, while others have nothing to shoot at because of the angle of the ship. And then there is the problem of the leaker. In naval terms, a leaker is a target that makes it through the defensive screen. Against 80 boats, the United States Navy expects leakers. Even if the carrier and its destroyers are 90% effective, 8 boats will still get through. 8 boats sounds like a small number compared to a 1,000-foot ship. But these are not just boats. In this scenario, each boat is a guided bomb. Some are packed with hundreds of pounds of explosives. Some carry a single torpedo or a pair of short-range missiles. They do not need to sink the carrier to win, they only need to hit it. The hull of a carrier is made of heavy steel. It is designed to survive a lot of damage, but the things on top of the hull are fragile. The radar arrays are made of glass and delicate electronics. The fuel lines for the jets are running just under the deck. The elevators that lift the planes are massive targets. If one boat hits an elevator, the carrier can no longer move its planes to the deck. The world's most powerful warship becomes a very expensive runway that no one can use. This is the moment the math turns into a tragedy. The sailors in the control center are watching the dots disappear as they fire. 10 dots gone, 20 dots gone, but the remaining 50 dots are now less than a mile away. The noise inside the ship is deafening. The heavy guns are shaking the entire structure. And then, the first explosion isn't on the radar screen. It is felt through the floor. The giant has been hit. The guns on the side of the carrier are not controlled by people. They are controlled by computers that think faster than any human can imagine. When the first Iranian boat crosses an invisible line in the water, the computers take over. They do not wait for a person to pull a trigger. They see a target, they calculate the distance, and they fire. Imagine a machine gun the size of a small car. It has 6 barrels that spin so fast they look like a solid blur of steel. When it fires, it does not sound like a normal gun. It sounds like the earth is being torn in half. This system fires 75 bullets every single second. These bullets are not made of lead. They are made of tungsten, a metal that is almost as hard as diamond. They are designed to shred through fiberglass and steel like it is paper. The gun tracks the leading boat. It sends a stream of fire into the hull. Within 2 seconds, that boat is no longer a boat. It is a cloud of debris and fire. But the gun does not stop to celebrate. It immediately snaps to the next target, and then the next, and then the next. This is what sailors call steel rain. The carrier also uses its missiles. These are small, white tubes that launch from the sides of the ship. They don't fly toward the horizon. They fly straight at the water. They are looking for the heat of the boat engines. When they hit, the explosion is massive. Inside the ship, the noise is terrifying. The sailors below deck cannot see what is happening. They only hear the thud of the missile launchers. They feel the vibration of the heavy guns through the floor. They hear the metal of the ship screaming under the stress of high-speed turns. In the first 60 seconds, the carrier looks like it is winning. 12 boats are gone. The water is filled with wreckage. The air smells like burnt gunpowder and spilled fuel. But the swarm does not turn back. This is the most frightening part of the scenario. In a normal battle, when you lose 10% of your force, you retreat. But these crews are not looking for a way home. They see their friends vanish in a ball of fire, and they push their engines even harder. They are using the smoke from the first wrecks to hide. The radar operators are shouting now. The smoke is confusing the sensors. The computers are starting to struggle. They are trying to tell the difference between a real boat and a piece of burning wood. The screen is a mess of red dots and static. The carrier's destroyers are firing too. Their heavy 5-inch guns are slamming rounds into the water. They are hitting targets. But they have a new problem. The boats are now so close to the carrier that the destroyers are afraid to fire. If they miss the boat, they might hit the carrier itself. This is the danger zone. The boats are now within 1 mile. The heavy guns on the carrier are still firing, but some of them have to stop to reload. The ammunition drums on these guns are not infinite. At the rate they fire, a gun can run dry in less than half a minute. On a $13 billion ship, everything is supposed to be perfect. But a gun is still a machine that gets hot, a machine that runs out of ammo. When a gun goes quiet, there is a moment of pure panic. A crew has to run out and reload the drum while the ship is under attack. They have to do this while boats are shooting rockets at them. They have to do this while the giant ship is turning hard to avoid a collision. The Iranian boats are smart. They are not just driving in a circle. They are using the shadows of the larger cargo ships nearby. They dart behind a civilian oil tanker to hide from the carrier's guns. Then they pop out on the other side, much closer than they were before. Then they pop out on the other side, much closer than they were before. The carrier cannot shoot through a civilian ship. The swarm is using the world's trade as a shield. By the time the second minute starts, the situation has shifted. The carrier is no longer just defending itself. It is struggling to keep track of where the danger is coming from. One gun is pointing at a boat that is already sinking. Another gun is jammed. A third gun is out of ammo. The leakers are no longer just a possibility. They are a reality. The sailors on the deck are now using their own weapons. They are standing behind heavy machine guns bolted to the rails of the ship. They are firing at the boats they can see with their own eyes. It has become a chaotic, loud, and desperate fight. The first 60 seconds are over. The carrier has destroyed 25 boats, but 55 boats are still coming, and they are now less than 30 seconds from the hull. The wall of lead was not enough. The steel rain was not enough. The giant is about to feel the first sting of the swarm. A carrier never sails alone. It has a family of ships around it called a strike group. These are the bodyguards. Specifically, they are the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. These ships are built for one purpose: to protect the carrier at all costs. They have their own radars and their own walls of guns. As the 80 boats close in, the destroyers move into a defensive circle. They are trying to create a physical barrier between the swarm and the ford. It is like a group of wolves trying to get to a calf while the grown bulls stand in the way. But there is a major problem. The water is too crowded. In the open ocean, a destroyer can see a target from miles away and delete it. In the Strait of Hormuz, the boats are weaving in and out of civilian traffic. There are massive oil tankers nearby that have nothing to do with the war. If a destroyer fires a long-range missile, it might hit a tanker full of millions of gallons of oil. This would be an environmental and political disaster. So the destroyers have to wait until the boats are close, very close. This is when the chaos of friendly fire begins. Imagine 3 massive warships all firing thousands of rounds of ammunition every minute. They are all moving at high speeds. They are all turning and banking to avoid the boats. The carrier is so large that it blocks the view of the destroyers on the other side. The sailors in the destroyer control rooms are looking at their screens. They see a target, but they also see the massive shape of the carrier right behind that target. If they fire their 5-inch gun and miss by just a few degrees, they will slam a shell into the side of their own carrier. The radio channels are filled with shouting. Commanders are yelling at each other to check their fire. Don't shoot north. You're pointing at the ford. Clear the lane. I have a boat at 500 yards. The stress is unimaginable. These sailors have trained for years to be precise. But in a swarm, precision disappears. The destroyers are also being attacked themselves. The 80 boats didn't all go for the carrier. Some of them split off to keep the bodyguards busy. A destroyer is a tough ship, but it is not as armored as a carrier. A single rocket-propelled grenade hitting a destroyer's radar can blind the entire ship. If the destroyer is blind, it can no longer protect the carrier. Now, the defensive shell is starting to crack. The boats are moving so fast and staying so low that the destroyers are losing track of them. One boat slips under the bow of a destroyer. It is so close that the destroyer's guns cannot even point, low enough to hit it. This boat is now inside the perimeter. Then another boat follows. Then 5 more. The destroyers are still fighting, but they are being left behind. The swarm has done exactly what it was designed to do. It has overwhelmed the bodyguards. It has created so much noise and confusion that the defenses have broken down. The fort is no longer a protected giant. The boats are now in the dead zone between the destroyers and the carrier's hull. In this space, the destroyers are useless because they are too afraid of hitting the fort. The carrier is truly on its own now, and the first boat has just reached the shadow of the carrier's massive hull. The math has finally reached its limit. The computers on the USS Gerald R Ford are doing everything they were designed to do, but they cannot create more time, and they cannot create more bullets. The defensive screen of the carrier has a hole in it. It is a small hole, barely wider than a single boat. But that is all the swarm needs. One boat, packed with explosives, slams into the side of the carrier. It does not hit the waterline. It hits the heavy steel hull just above the waves. The sound is not a sharp crack. It is a deep, heavy boom that travels through the entire length of the ship. 4,000 sailors feel the deck jump beneath their feet. In a movie, this would be the end. The ship would break in half and sink into the ocean, but that is not how a supercarrier works. The USS Gerald R. Ford is the most survivable ship ever built. It is made of thousands of watertight compartments. It has a double hull that can absorb a massive amount of energy. One small boat hitting the side is like a bee stinging an elephant. It hurts. It leaves a mark, but the elephant is still standing. The problem is not that the ship is sinking. The problem is what happens on the surface. A carrier is a giant platform for airplanes. Everything that makes it powerful is sitting out in the open. The radar systems are on the island, the tall tower on the side of the deck. The antennas for the radios are sticking out everywhere. The jet fuel is being pumped through lines just inches under the surface of the flight deck. The second boat does not hit the hull. The second boat is a suicide boat. The pilot steers it directly into one of the massive elevators on the side of the ship. These elevators are what bring the jets up from the hangar below. When the boat explodes, the elevator is twisted out of its tracks. It is now stuck halfway between the hangar and the deck. In an instant, the carrier has lost the ability to launch half of its planes. Then the third boat hits. It fires a short-range missile at the bridge. It doesn't destroy the ship, but it shatters the glass and fills the command center with smoke. The captain can no longer see the water. The radar operators are looking at screens that have gone black. The antennas have been shredded by shrapnel. The giant is now blind and deaf. This is what naval experts call a mission kill. The ship is still floating. The nuclear reactors are still running. The hull is perfectly fine, but the ship can no longer do its job. It cannot talk to its destroyers. It cannot launch its jets. It cannot see the other 50 boats that are still closing in. A $13 billion warship has been turned into a very large, very expensive piece of floating steel. On the deck, the chaos is total. The sailors who were supposed to be fueling jets are now grabbing fire hoses. The pilots are sitting in their cockpits, waiting for an order that will never come. They are watching the horizon, seeing more tiny white wakes heading toward them. They can hear the heavy machine guns still firing from the edges of the deck. But the sound is getting closer. The steel rain is failing. The swarm has reached the walls of the fortress, and they are not finished. There are still 10 boats within a few hundred yards. They are zigzagging through the smoke of the first explosions. They aren't looking for a mission kill anymore. They are looking for the kill shot. The sailors on the Ford have spent their lives training for a high-tech war. But right now, the high-tech is gone. They are fighting with whatever they have left, and the world is about to watch the unthinkable happen. The final minute of the attack begins with a sound that should be impossible. It is the sound of silence. On the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, one of the massive Sea Sparrow missile launchers stops moving. The computer that controls it has been shattered by a rocket from one of the small boats. The phalanx gun on the starboard side is also quiet. It has run out of ammunition, and the sailors trying to reload it are pinned down by machine gun fire from the water. This is the breaking point. This is the moment when the defense is no longer a wall. It is just a collection of brave people fighting individual battles. 5 more Iranian boats are now within 200 yards. They are so close that the carrier's hull looks like a mountain of steel rising above them. The pilots of these boats are looking for the soft spots. They aren't aiming for the thick armor at the waterline. They are aiming for the catapults. These are the long tracks on the deck that shoot the fighter jets into the air. If a catapult is bent by even an inch, it is useless. One boat hits the side of the ship right under catapult number 1. The explosion isn't enough to sink the ship, but the heat and the pressure buckle the flight deck. The carrier can no longer launch its heaviest jets. Then, another boat finds a different target. It slams into the island. That is the tower where the captain and the flight controllers work. The explosion blows out the windows and destroys the main radio antennas. The Ford is now a giant that cannot hear, cannot see, and cannot fight back. The admiral on board has to make the hardest choice of his life. He looks at the radar, or what is left of it. He sees 30 more boats still coming. He knows his guns are failing. He knows his destroyers are too far away to help. He gives the order to cease flight operations and withdraw. The world's most powerful warship is turning tail. It is moving away from the fight as fast as its engines will allow. But a carrier is not a speedboat. It takes a long time to turn a pleasant 1,000-foot ship. As it turns, it exposes its stern. This is the back of the ship where the propellers and rudders are located. This is the most vulnerable spot on any vessel. If the rudders are hit, the ship cannot steer. It will just move in a giant circle until it runs out of fuel. The remaining Iranian boats see the carrier turning. They know this is their chance. They push their engines to the limit, trailing white foam across the dark water. 2 boats manage to get directly behind the carrier. They release their mines and their small torpedoes. The explosions happen deep under the water. The vibration is so strong, it snaps pipes inside the engine room. The Ford slows down. It doesn't stop, but it loses its speed. The giant is limping. The swarm begins to pull back. They have done what they came to do. They have lost 40 boats and hundreds of men. But the USS Gerald R. Ford is no longer a threat. It is a smoking, battered wreck that is barely moving. The Battle of the Strait of Hormuz is over. But the real disaster is just beginning. Because while the sailors are fighting for their lives, the rest of the world is watching, and they are seeing something they never thought possible. The invincibility of the United States Navy has just been erased in less than 20 minutes. The news reaches the global markets before the smoke even clears. And that is when the true cost of the swarm starts to hit home. The news of the attack travels faster than any missile. In the modern world, you cannot hide a battle in the middle of the ocean. There are thousands of sailors on the USS Gerald R. Ford with smartphones in their pockets. There are satellites overhead that see the heat of every explosion. Within minutes, the first grainy videos appear on the internet. The world sees the pride of the United States Navy surrounded by smoke. The world sees the most expensive ship ever built limping toward the horizon. And the first place that feels the impact is not a battlefield, it is a trading floor. In New York and London, the price of oil does not just go up, it teleports. In a normal world, the price of oil moves by a few cents or $1 at a time. On this afternoon, it jumps by $20 in an hour, then another 30. Traders are not looking at charts anymore, they are looking at a map of the Strait of Hormuz. They know that 20% of the world's energy has just been cut off. The gateway has been slammed shut. But the real crisis is something most people never think about: insurance. Every massive tanker in the ocean is covered by insurance. Without it, these ships are not allowed to enter any port in the world. The companies that provide this insurance are the most cautious people on Earth. As soon as the first boat hit the Ford, these companies hit a button. They declare the Persian Gulf a total loss zone. This means that if a tanker enters those waters, its insurance is canceled immediately. Suddenly, hundreds of ships carrying millions of gallons of oil simply stop. They drop their anchors in the middle of the sea. They are afraid to move forward because they might be attacked. They are afraid to move backward because they have nowhere to go. A line of tankers begins to form outside the strait. It stretches for miles. It is a traffic jam that threatens to break the global economy. This isn't just about gas prices at your local station. Everything you buy, your food, your clothes, your electronics, moves on ships. Most of those ships rely on the cheap fuel that comes from the Gulf. When the fuel stops, the trucks stop. When the trucks stop, the grocery store shelves start to go empty. Within 48 hours, the Hormuz premium becomes a household phrase. It is the extra cost everyone has to pay just because a few small boats found a hole in a giant's armor. But the financial damage is only half the story. The other half is the psychological shock. For 80 years, the world has operated under one big assumption. The assumption was that the United States Navy could go anywhere and do anything. If you were a small country, you didn't challenge a carrier. You didn't even think about it. That assumption was the glue that held the global trade system together. It gave businesses the confidence to send ships across the world. Now, that glue has dissolved. Every regional power in the world is watching the footage of the Ford. They are seeing that $13 billion of technology can be defeated by 80 speedboats. They are realizing that the rules of the ocean have changed. The era of the supercarrier is not just being questioned, it is being buried. In Washington, the panic is absolute. The government has to decide how to respond. If they do nothing, they look weak. If they launch a full-scale war, they risk losing even more ships to the same swarm tactics. There are no easy choices left. The giant is wounded, and the world is watching it bleed. The Red Sea isn't just a place on a map anymore. It is the color of the global markets as they crash. And as the sun sets on the first day, after the attack, one thing is clear. The world we woke up in this morning is gone. A new world is emerging, and it is a much more dangerous place. The world did not just watch a ship get hit that afternoon. It watched an idea die. For over 100 years, the aircraft carrier was the undisputed king of the ocean. Before the carrier, it was the battleship. But when the first planes took off from a wooden deck, the battleship became a slow, expensive target. Now, the 80 boats in the Strait of Hormuz have done the same thing to the carrier. This is the end of the carrier era. Naval history is usually written in decades. It takes a long time to design, build, and launch a new kind of ship. But the lesson of the USS Gerald R was learned in less than 20 minutes. Military leaders around the globe are now looking at a very painful set of numbers. The United States spent $13 billion to build one ship. They spent decades training 4,000 people to run it. And yet, that ship was stopped by 80 boats that cost less than a single fighter jet. In the world of business, this is called a bad return on investment. In the world of war, it is called a disaster. From this moment on, the math of naval power has flipped upside down. For a century, the goal was to build the biggest, most powerful thing on the water. The bigger the ship, the more power you could project. But the swarm proved that being big is no longer an advantage. In a world of cheap drones and fast sensors, being big just means you are an easy target. The new rules of the ocean are being written in the offices of ship designers right now. They are moving away from the big hull and towards something they call the cloud fleet. Imagine instead of one carrier, you have 100 unmanned boats. These boats are small, maybe only 30 feet long. They don't have crews, so you don't have to worry about anyone dying. They are spread out over hundreds of miles of ocean. If an enemy manages to sink 10 of them, it doesn't matter. You still have 90 left. This is what experts call distributed lethality. It means you take all the weapons that used to be on one giant ship and you spread them out. You make the fleet a network instead of a single object. If you cut one part of the network, the rest of it keeps working. The swarm attack provided a blueprint for every small country in the world. They realized they don't need a billion-dollar navy to defend their coast. They just need a garage full of racing boats and some basic software. This is the democratization of naval destruction. It means that the old empires can no longer use their massive ships to bully smaller nations. The ocean has become a dangerous hallway where the giants are no longer welcome. The United States Navy has already started to cancel its plans for future supercarriers. They are shifting their money into robotic ships and underwater drones. They are realizing that the human element is becoming a liability on the front lines. A person needs food, water, and air. A person gets tired and scared. A person is expensive to train and impossible to replace. But a computer chip is cheap. A sensor can work for months without a break. The future of naval warfare is not a captain standing on a bridge with binoculars. The future is a technician in a dark room in Virginia, controlling 1,000 drones on the other side of the planet. But as the humans leave the ships, the world becomes a colder place. A carrier wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of national pride and a tool for helping people after natural disasters. A drone cannot represent a country in the same way. A robotic fleet cannot offer a handshake. We are moving into a world where power is measured by data and numbers, not by bravery or tradition. The giants are being retired. The age of the supercarrier is over. And the new rulers of the sea are small, silent, and everywhere. But there is one more thing we haven't considered. What happens to the people who used to rely on the giant to keep the peace? When the protector is gone, the world doesn't just stay quiet. It gets much, much louder. The smoke from the Persian Gulf did more than just clog the air. It cleared the vision of every leader on the planet. For nearly a century, the world operated on a single, unspoken rule. That rule said that a superpower could park a carrier off your coast and tell you what to do. It was called gunboat diplomacy. It worked because the cost of saying no was too high. If you fought back, you lost. But after the swarm, that rule was deleted. The political fallout was not just about a damaged ship. It was about the collapse of a specific kind of fear. Suddenly, regional powers realized they didn't need to match the United States in a fair fight. They realized they could build a fortress shoreline for the cost of a single high-end fighter jet. They began to buy thousands of cheap drones and fast boats. They bought sea mines and short-range missiles by the crate. The power balance of the world shifted from the center to the edges. The global policeman was effectively forced into retirement. Washington found itself in an impossible position. If they kept sending carriers into narrow waters, they risked losing more $13 billion ships. If they stopped sending them, they lost their influence over the world's most important trade routes. The American public watching. The footage of the burning Ford began to ask a very difficult question. Why were we spending so much money on targets? The political debate in the United States turned inward. The era of global projection began to fade. The government started to pull its forces back to the deep, open ocean where they were safe. But when the protector pulls back, a vacuum is created. And in politics, a vacuum is always filled by someone else. Regional players began to carve out their own zones of influence. They realized that within 50 miles of their coast, they were now the masters. They started to set their own rules for who could sail through their waters. They started to demand protection fees or transit taxes from oil tankers. The world's oceans, which used to be a single open highway, turned into a collection of gated neighborhoods. Global trade became more expensive and much more complicated. Alliances that had lasted for 70 years began to crumble. Smaller countries that used to rely on the United States for protection looked at the Ford and made a different choice. They started making deals with their neighbors instead. They realized that a local swarm was a better security blanket than a distant superpower. This change reshaped the map of the world for decades. It wasn't just about who had the biggest guns anymore. It was about who had the most patience and the most rocks to throw. The long shadow of that afternoon in the Gulf touched everything from election results to the price of a loaf of bread. It taught the world that technology is not the same thing as power. Power is the ability to make someone else blink. And on that afternoon, the giant was the one who blinked first. The world became smaller, louder, and much less stable. The big piece of the carrier era was over. and in its place was a world where anyone with a fiberglass boat and a radio could change the course of history. The story of the swarm is not just about boats and ships. It is about a fundamental change in how the world thinks about strength. For a century, we believed that bigger was better. We believed that a more expensive machine was a more powerful machine. But the 80 boats in the Strait of Hormuz taught us that this is no longer true. There are 4 core lessons we can take from this scenario. The first lesson is that numbers have a quality of their own. In military circles, this is called saturation. We spent decades trying to build the perfect, high-tech shield. We thought that if we made one ship smart enough, it could never be hit. But the math of the trigger is cold and final. A gun can only fire so many bullets. A radar can only track so many targets. When 80 boats come at you from every direction, being smart is not enough. You simply run out of time and you run out of ammunition. The swarm proved that 1,000 small things will always eventually defeat one big thing. The second lesson is that the environment decides the winner. In the middle of the deep, open ocean, the Gerald R. Ford is still the master of the world. But the world's trade does not move through the deep ocean. It moves through narrow hallways like the Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, and the South China Sea. In these places, the giant has nowhere to run. A carrier in a narrow strait is like a fighter jet trying to fly through a thick forest. Eventually, it is going to hit a tree. Geography is the great equalizer. It takes away the advantage of long-range sensors and gives the advantage to the person who is already standing there waiting. The third lesson is about the economy of war. This is perhaps the most painful lesson for a superpower to learn. It is no longer about who has more total money. It is about who can afford to lose more in a single afternoon. The United States cannot afford to lose one carrier. It represents $13 billion and 4,000 lives. It takes years to build and decades to train the crew. But a regional power can afford to lose 80 boats every single week. The boats are cheap, the engines are mass-produced, and the crews are easy to replace. When the cost of the attack is a tiny fraction of the cost of the defense, the defender is already losing. The swarm is a way to bankrupt a giant without ever winning a major war. The fourth and final lesson is about the fragility of fear. A carrier is a tool of peace only because people are afraid to touch it. This is what we call deterrence. Deterrence is like a glass bottle. It is incredibly strong and can hold a lot of pressure. But once it is cracked, it is useless. As soon as those 80 boats proved that the Gerald R. Ford could be hit, the fear vanished. And when the fear vanishes, the global policeman loses his badge. Every other nation in the world was watching that afternoon. They realized that the rules of the ocean had been rewritten by a few speedboats and some brave crews. They realized that the age of the giant was over. We are now moving into a world of cloud fleets. We are leaving behind the era of the massive ship and entering the era of the distributed network. The future of naval power is not one captain on a bridge. The future is 1,000 small, unmanned machines working together like a single brain. The gnat did not just kill the giant. The gnat became the new model for how power works in the 21st century. We often think of history as a slow, predictable march forward. But sometimes, history is a sudden jump. A 20-minute battle in a narrow strait can erase a century of tradition and billions of dollars of investment. The ocean is no longer a place where you can hide behind a wall of steel. It is a place where the many will always hunt the few. The lesson of the swarm is simple. The world has changed, and the giants are the last ones to find out. This is a hypothetical scenario based on the historical record. Real outcomes would depend on factors no model can predict.